Okay, so we have, broadly speaking, 3 contributions on reputation, and I think it's an important part of this meeting. Now, anybody has any questions? I know, Richard, you got your question in last time, didn't you?
It wasn't really.
Okay.
It wasn't really a question, Anthony, and it was in relation, I think, to a previous speaker. But I did just want to flag up. I think there was a question from the floor saying how did Wellcome reconcile the metrics that it wanted to utilise with the ones that the EU wanted to utilise, and if we couldn't establish any kind of cross-sectoral standards here, how useful were these metrics of impact going to be? And I wasn't going to ask a question. I was just going to flag up that a couple of years ago, NISO got a Sloan Foundation grant to do some work on developing, the National Institute, the National Institute for Standards. Sorry, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and for the last 2 years they've been working on an analysis of the various quotes unquote alt metrics, and the eventual output of that is intended to be a set of standards that they will then put out for hoped for use. Worth keeping an eye on that, I think. Actually, I think it's definitely a desirable objective to try to find something that looks sufficiently robust and sensible that both the EU and Wellcome and everybody else would seek to adopt.
Any comments? Any comments, Charlie?
Only that I think we've got people in the room from the NISO working group, so I would rather not be the person that commented. That be.
Are you a NISO working group person?
Yeah.
Oh, you're one.
I'm one of them, yeah. Well, I'll just make a comment. So I am Jean. I'm product development manager at altmetric.com. I'm in working group A. So there's several different working groups in this NISO initiative. Some are, I think, definitions related, use case related. Then there's things about outputs, defining those different impacts and things. So quite a lot of different slices. So the group that I have been in is the definitions and use cases one. And I, quite honestly, I think after all the discussion, and Mike, you might agree with me, is that I don't think we can ever come up with standards, but we can come up with recommendations or good practices for vendors to follow. The standards idea, I think, is a good one. But at the moment, I don't know if all metrics are in a state where we can actually get to that point, and at least not in the near future. But maybe you want to comment.
No, I completely agree. And NISO doesn't have the weight to implement standards in any case. So all we can do is to make recommendations, which is what we're doing in the area of research data.
But NISO has moved from being a standards organisation only to one which tries to encourage best practices, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's much easier in a way to have standards where you can go through a proper procedure, whereas NISO, wonderful though it is, tends to be very American. I know there's always a few international people, and it makes it difficult. But it is a useful contribution, clearly. Yes, Rod. This is Rod Cookson is about to have an exciting new job.
I wasn't going to talk about that. Thanks, Anthony. I've got a question for Fiona and Dave. We're starting to get data publication more often now. What infrastructure and what metrics need to be established before researchers can trust a data publication or a video publication the same way they trust a research article now?
Right. Okay. I could probably talk to the end of the day on this. I think as much as anything, as journals and scholarly publications evolve, in a sense, it's not just about the facsimile of print that has historically been a publication. It's going to be about the links as we're saying in the break, between them. And I think, as much as anything, people need to be able to trust the links. Excuse me. So I think some standards need to be evolved and some safeguards around what a publication actually is very important. I mean, Thompson. I mean, there's some people here from Thompson and other bibliometricians. I think who can also be talking about citations to data, but. There are actually also groups working on bibliometrics around data publication. For instance, the Research Data Alliance has got a group which is actually going to be putting out a report sometime in the next 3-4 months. And again, they have actually been doing surveys around what, say, repositories provide in terms of statistics and usage and downloads and citations, and what people actually want and need. In terms of those metrics, and they are very different things at the moment, and they're not being sufficiently, I think, tagged in order for people to be able to do useful searches. I think a lot of the impetus could come from the funders. I think if, for instance, for the next ref, people can be very, very clear about fund ref and ORCIDs and the way that things are tracked, so that proper queries can actually be made in the future, then I think again people will be able to make more sense of what's actually happening. And obviously there's metadata, which is what I mean. It just goes on.
We're going back to the Trust project that Anthony and I worked on for about 15 months, and. I mean, people didn't talk about data really. They didn't rate. I mean, okay, that's 2 years ago. Maybe things are moving, but they did. It wasn't a big thing. It didn't lead to reputation or nothing like that. And lots of them were a bit worried about the dangers of releasing data they weren't in full grip of to somewhere else. But where they felt they could trust it was if it was tied to a publication, and it was known authors attached to a paper. That gave it a kind of thing. But they were very dubious about looking anywhere else, because when you get in data, you're in an area where you don't know. But,
I think ultimately, so much of reputation is tied to institutional career progression. So until promotion and tenure processes change and institutions embrace these other forms, which of course will require everything that you have said, but I think that's the only nexus around which we're going to see real change in researcher perceptions, until it's something that they can put down for their tenure committee. And there's some movement towards that in some organisations, actually more in the US, weirdly, I think, than here. But.
We have time for one more question, and Damon's.
Actually, it wasn't really a question, it was sort of continuing that discussion. It seems that I would sort of go further and say there is a kind of direct, they're kind of at opposite ends, the idea of reputation versus data sharing. You know, at the moment, especially, well, I don't know, I'm a neuroscientist originally, and that was, in that field, data sharing is, people, you know, they see it as their data that they own, and that's how they make their reputation, you know, by doing things with that data. So the idea of actually giving it to other people would be like giving away your reputation almost. You know, it really is sort of that far the other end of the axis. So I don't know what to do about that. I mean, you know, obviously, PLOS, we're very keen on data sharing as much as possible, but it's I don't think anyone has really come to fix that problem yet, and I don't know how it's going to be done.